So the last item on our agenda is the FlexPower Bundle update, Part 2. Mr. John Bonner.
Good afternoon, Board. I appreciate once again the chance to be able to speak about the FlexPower Bundle. Mr. Mayor, good to see you again, sir. As you recall, we did quite a good conversation last month about the FlexPower Bundle. We talked about our power plants and sort of the notion of moving forward with this power bundle, and we're going to go a little bit more into detail of this. We're going to talk a little bit about the load side, and I want to show also a little bit more about the process for moving forward. On our agenda, we're going to give a little bit more information on our assets as far as their capacity and age, and then compare our total capacity against our load forecast over the next 10 years. We're going to show a little bit about how we use those assets to meet our demand both in the winter and the summer peak, and talk a little bit more, like I said, about the process moving forward for weighing our options. So here's a good picture about where our portfolio sits at this time. On the vertical axis is megawatts, and so on the far right you see the orange bar. That's our total number of megawatts of capacity. Take the nameplate capacity of all of our power plants and add them up, and that's what you have. And then across the bottom axis you have the age of those assets, and so they're identified underneath it. So Spruce 2 and the CTs number 5 through 8 are under 10 years old. The CTs 1 through 4, Rio Nogales and ABR, are 10 through 19 years old, etc. What I want to point out is those aging units we were talking about last week are in this area. These are the Summers units, only 1, 2, and 3, all between 40 and 50 plus years old. And if you add all that together, it's about 30% of our capacity is in that range. So there's 2 points to be made about that. First is that these plants were designed in the 50s and 60s and built in the 60s and early 70s. They were built for what's called the intermediate role, which means they start up in the morning and shut down at night. So these plants have basically been doing that for 50 years. Early in their lifetime, they did that every day, year round, but here lately we use them mostly in the summer. So what does it do to a power plant to start up in the morning and shut down each night? That's a lot of thermal cycles, a lot of expansion and contraction. And so when you do that thousands and thousands of times to a unit, it leads to reliability issues with large metal components. So that's one of the things when we talk about shoring up the capacity of these older units, is that since they have so many years on them, they have much more likelihood to have a major failure due to the accumulation of all of these thermal cycles. And the other is that since they are that old, they were built during a time when power plants were less efficient. So nowadays we deploy them last because they're the least efficient. We run all of our more efficient units the most. So when do we use them? We use them in the summer when all the rest of our assets are maxed out. So they're used during the time of year when our load is much higher and prices are much higher. However, the consequences of failure are much higher if one of those has a failure. So when we talk about shoring up the reliability, they're more likely to fail, and the consequences of failure are much higher. So that's what we're talking about, the risk associated with that older capacity. Any questions or comments about that? Okay, because I want to move to this picture right here. What we're looking at right here, the red line is our load forecast going forward from, this is in calendar years 2020 to 2030. And the columns are our total capacity. The lighter shaded part of the column is the capacity represented by those 5 older units. And then the darker solid bar is all the rest of the capacity that we have. And it also includes an allowance for our solar and wind that we statistically count on and factor in to be available on peak. So you can see from this that even this coming summer, we are depending to meet our native load obligation using all of our units and some of these units that are of questionable reliability. And the situation just increases from there as load ramps up. So the point to be made there is that each year, each of these older units have a chance of having a failure in the peak time, and we're going to be relying on that year after year after year And what are the chances that we'll be able to have a successful year like we did last summer with no failures over the next 5 summers? So the power bundle, as we mentioned, integration of the gas toll plus the solar and storage feathers in over the next several years. So let's see how that goes onto this same graph. Okay, so what we've done is we've taken the power bundle capacity and added it to the top of the blue, which is our existing capacity and renewables, and taken that capacity at risk and put it at the top. And so you can see by the addition of the power bundle, we're effectively removing that, that particular risk from our portfolio. We're making it so that in order to meet our native load requirements, we can do it all with our newer units, the power bundle units, and not have to rely on these older, less reliable units for meeting native load obligation. And it grows because we'll be putting solar farms online over the next several years. So you can see the yellow portion is solar. It grows over time as we go from the introduction of the first few solar farms to the full 900 megawatts. And so that actually covers our obligation all the way till 2025. Now we have more units retiring after that. Load continues to grow. So another decision about capacity will have to happen sometime, in the 22 to 24 time frame in order to address the back half of the decade. But the purpose right now that I'm saying of implementing the power bundle at this stage is to mitigate the risk of those older units in meeting the requirements of our customer on peak in the summer. Why is it so urgent to do it right now? Because the consequence of not being available is so high. And I'll just have to reference how we had those high price intervals last summer when the market was very scarce in the $9,000 prices. So that's kind of the urgency behind getting some capacity in place sooner versus later. Any questions or comments or thoughts about that? Yes, sir, Chris. Okay, sure. Okay, so the approach aligns with our flexible bath strategy because it's the additional small amounts. Yes, I'm sorry.
So the flex plan is also requesting that we also make that investment in the aging ones too? Or it's totally
to
separate?
replace the aging.
It's to replace the
To
aging.
take the risk out of the
And
portfolio.
in addition to the other things.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
And I think the other thing, John, those.
And are we being asked to buy for 10 or do we have the option for less than 10 years?
I think we're open. I mean, we
We're
could be
open.
5 years, 7 years, 10 years. I think we're gonna look, see what the market, tells us.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood correctly.
The solar, we expect the solar and storage to be longer term contracts.
Well, that I understand, but I'm talking
the-
about
The gas toll.
the
The gas
gas
toll
stuff,
could be
'cause that
could
is
be
a concern
shorter,
for
could
me.
be shorter depending on, what our decision process will
I
come
think
back and
what we
talk.
wanna do is see kind of where the market is, cause obviously a shorter deal might be more expensive because the next 3 to 5
Obviously.
years are very high priced in terms of scarcity pricing. If some of the new technology like
Might.
storage comes in, maybe the back half gets much more reasonable, so I think.
Do we have any like third party, or I'm sure y'all do, any forecasts of if we choose to buy less, commit to less years, like
We
5
haven't-
versus 10?
We have indicative pricing on certain things, but we would have to go out with a formal process to try to see what people would really be interested in and use the time frame as what happens when you modulate the time frame. Yeah.
But at least we're not being asked to commit to buying 10 versus 5.
We are nowhere
Right now,
near
we're
that.
just-
Nowhere near
Okay, I just
that.
want to make
commitment.
sure.
But uniformly, they've said that the 10 years is what gives us the low price.
Well,
tag.
obviously,
Well,
like whenever you,
But
but
John,
I mean, I think
we're
I
gonna
want to
look
be
at all
clear.
different timeframes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think the other thing John didn't mention was those 5 units are gas steam units, or
Okay.
gas.
Yes, they are. And that's a great point because any toll that we would do would be with a combined cycle unit. Combined cycle unit, much more efficient, lower emissions, type of unit. The other thing that I failed to bring up is that if we're in this situation where we have adequate firm capacity to meet our obligations, and we have some sort of a mechanical problem with some of those older units, it's a much easier decision to go ahead and retire it early because you have enough capacity to meet your obligations, and you don't have to make a huge investment just to keep the plant online for 2 more years, that sort of thing.
And does it include wind too, or this is just
This
strictly?
stack does include the blue includes.
The blue is
renewables.
the natural, yeah.
So the renewables,
Alright,
that the
there.
wind is in
Yes,
there.
The wind's already
In there?
in our
Plan.
overall portfolio. But our power bundle does not include wind because we already have 1,000 megawatts of
Okay.
wind, so we're looking to
To
bring the
offset it with
solar up.
with different alternatives.
We expect solar to be much more heavily invested in the portfolio over time.
Plus, it's also more unpredictable.
Yeah, more on peak, right.
Go ahead.
John, can you go back to that for a
Okay.
second? What you just said kind of intrigued me, and I want to understand it properly. I mean, this is sort of a hedge against unreliable power source. If we got into 21, 22, and we get our Flex Bundle PPA contract going, you're saying we're in a much more secure position if, in fact, one of the unreliable pieces of our portfolio were to go down and we're in peak, because we will have reliable, firm capacity. At that point, we could make a decision about whether or not we want to shut something down early.
Yes.
Because it's a bad.
That goes back
So-
to the,
Well, my question then is, why aren't we doing this with the equipment to go ahead, with the commitment to go ahead and shut them down early?
I think I'll pass that to my COO.
Well, I think we believe that option is available to us. I mean, we were looking to, and just because we put a life out there doesn't really mean that it's gonna make it. What sometimes happens is we have a catastrophic failure in a blade or a turbine, and then we would make a decision like it's really not worth it to keep that going 3 or 4 more years. But now we've already got that capacity to do it. So it really is about transitioning out of those older, less efficient, more emitting perspectives, but making sure that it's firm along the way.
Yeah, no, I get that, and reliability clearly is one of our customers and our city's top priorities. So, but so is the environmental part of this,
Right.
and so, if part of this is again a 900 megawatt commitment on solar, the impetus for the entire thing being reliability, why aren't we just coupling those together? And let me just make sure I set the proper expectation, because I did hear you. We're also looking at timelines. This isn't we're not going out into a 10-year commitment tomorrow. We're looking at how these timelines line up. So just to be clear, we haven't actually decided on this strategy at all, firmed up anything.
No.
Okay.
No, and to your point, so one of the most difficult things that happens is like we get asked, set a date. That plant has to retire on this date, and this plant has to retire on this date. But again, even when we decided to close Dealey, we went to the market to look what the capacity could be before we decided to close it for sure. We found a new unit, Rio, and then the STEP program just kept getting increasingly more effective. And so for us, it's not a matter of like picking that date. It's a matter of putting everything in place that we can so that the community doesn't get impacted arbitrarily. Again, we might think we're in 2023 closer to better energy storage, which could accelerate or push it out there. So we are totally open and believe that we should be replacing this capacity. But for us to then say, then that plant's gonna close on this day and that plant's gonna close on that day, it's not like a cutting on the faucet. Is more of, okay, then we'll tell you we can cover everything with this plan, and then the more we get close to a certain date, then we say that. But to say today it's a particular date, we're not even sure which unit is gonna do better or not. There are multiple units. So our goal is ultimately to get rid of those units, so.
I understand that logically, and I think all of us come at this with different priorities. We give all of the customers priorities that were in the surveys. I don't want to jump ahead several slides, but I do have a question to follow up on what you just said.
Okay.
After we have the slide go up, several slides from now. So
I would go to the slide.
no, go. I'd rather us go through the
Just go,
presentation
just
than continue the
moving.
conversation.
So I was just summing up that this is the, one more reminder of the power bundle, the 900, the 50, and the 500. And that it's the combination of all of them that we think provides a good good solution for the next 10 years. So so I wanted to show how these capacities play out on the hottest day in the summer and the coldest day in the winter, and how that complementarity works out. So we showed this picture last last month, and I put the units on it as you asked. This is the hottest day in the summer and the coldest day in the winter, and they're on the same scale, 0 to 6,000. So the summer peak around 5,000 megawatts. And during these are the hours of the day solar performs, and it drops off very quickly toward the end of the day. We would be deploying our storage to meet the peak. Yet still, there's a large amount of our customer demand that has to be met by the rest of the fleet, whether the gas toll's part of that or not. The rest is the peak. Plus, there's all the night and all time and all of the night in the morning that has to cover that. And then we have our wind power as it produces throughout the day. Winter is an especially tough challenge for us because the peak happens before, the peak in ERCOT happens before the sun comes up. And then there's another one at night that happens after the sun goes down. There's much less solar production because there's usually cloud cover. And temperatures, plus it's a shorter day. So there's much less solar production, and there's a lot of risk associated with this wind production because frequently the highest, coldest day corresponds to the day that we get icing in the West Texas. And so sometimes our wind farms are iced up. So ERCOT is getting more and more concerned about meeting this winter peak than the summer peak, or it's getting to be of equal concern. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the power bundle, while it does raise, and don't forget these yellow sections have the 900 megawatts of solar in it. So while that brings it in, there still is the combination of all of that firms up the renewables, to meet the needs of our customers. Any questions about these pictures? And I would love to be able to add to the storage number, but that's we would like to be able to add to the amount of storage, but as you can see, it's a long way to go to have enough storage available, to meet the needs of our customers.
And this is current state, not
Current
future
state.
state.
Well, this would be after power bundle, like 2 years.
But current state.
Yes, yes.
But keep in mind, that's a projection, right?
Right.
I mean, to his point, there might be
But that's
days where
a
no
2-year.
wind can show up because it's a bad weather day, or it had to be a sunny winter day by some point in time to get that.
No, but I guess my
Yeah.
question is more based on current state, 2-year current state projections of technologies that have been proven, have been in play for a while.
These are all existing things.
This
you
is
can
all
get
the
to
things
today.
that exist, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have the opportunity to add more storage, but that's still a small sliver, and
Right,
it's gonna
right.
take a lot of storage to get there.
See the new Tesla trucks that are gonna come out on the market?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I would say that anyone's projections on what that storage is gonna be today is gonna dramatically change even next year.
Yeah, I agree.
Probably so.
And we should offer ourselves an opportunity to see what that looks like.
That's what I'm saying.
So here are the numbers that are behind that. I wanted to point out, for the summer peak, this, when I was saying earlier about the statistical amount of solar and wind that we use to calculate our summer peak, this is how that turns out. And then in winter, the 0 solar or 1% solar is counted for planning purposes against the solar peak, West Texas and coastal wind. So these are the numbers behind those pictures before that. So moving on to how we intend to go forward and how this would play out. Focusing solely on the solar and storage, we want to look at we will use this RFP process to explore current pricing for solar and storage. Current pricing, what does that mean? Well, when you get a news article or something over the internet says that some company paid so many dollars for solar, that means that they were offered that months ago and they took months to do the negotiations. And that was done during the paradigm of perhaps a complete investment tax credit applicable to it. And so they'll get a certain number. Well, now when we go out, it's going to be specific to ERCOT and CPS Energy and the current investment tax credit environment and the number of megawatts we want. What is the pricing there? Who knows what that's going to be? I mean, it's probably going to be in that low range that we've seen before, but we know that there are things that are changing in the market, especially market availability and timeline. I speak to solar developers all the time. And one of them told me recently that unless you already have your panels in the United States, it's going to take you a long time to build a solar farm. We had usually been counting on 12 to 18 months to build a solar farm. But because of the tariffs, it's harder to get things in in from overseas, they're much more expensive. And so it's kind of a wild card, the availability and the price of solar in this environment. So that's really one of the main things that we hope to get out of this RFP. How is the actual offers differ from what the press has shown over the last year or so? It could be different. I'm hoping we get really good prices, especially with the amount of solar we're going out to get. And
And
so,
just to function, and especially on storage, it's a really good time to see what those prices are out there in the marketplace.
Mhm.
So we can be flexible.
But ultimately, we want to add a whole lot more storage, to your point. It's, the solar we added a long time ago, the wind we added a long time ago was really good, and it's in our portfolio, but everything has gotten better. So we've been able to merge it in. So even if we start with 50, our ultimate goal is to achieve better penetration and increase the amount that we can do in energy storage over time. And that pricing, we believe, you're right, is going to get better, and the effectiveness is going to get better.
Maybe this is not the correct terminology, but since I just went to the ERCOT, the GridX, there was a lot of talk about supply chain, right? So the RFP process would heavily take into consideration, right, the vetting process of that supply chain, knowing that my biggest concerns would be security and safety. We talk a lot about this need for renewables, but there's also a big risk, a significant risk with some of the newer technologies. And then who are the suppliers? As we know that one of the challenges is that whatever innovation is happening out there, it's another country that's producing the hardware and the software for a lot of this innovation. And so I will always be very mindful that we can't risk safety and security over wanting to meet, incorporate new technology for environmental purposes and also for reliability and cost effectiveness. And so I just want to make sure as we go through this process that we're very mindful of, what's out there.
Trustee Gonzalez, I'll just note for you that Fred, Bonniewell, and I on the safety and security side and on the supply chain side, and our teams are very much mindful of this point. And so we take your input very seriously, and it is informing how we're thinking about the supply chain security and knowing what the countries of origin are and how you track each component through that process, and also what obligations we put on our suppliers to make sure that they are also having appropriate diligence.
I know we had some brief, but I just want to I know where we're going. I know what the future looks like. Well, I can't tell literally, but we definitely know, we have a good feel for that, and those of us who are in the industry. And I just want to stress the importance that we don't sacrifice security and safety just to meet much needed environmental goals, but we need to be very careful.
right. And we expect a whole lot of interest in this.
Well,
in
I'm
this
sure.
RFP. I mean, it's big. It's going to be probably replied to around the world. I mean, it'll be in the press, and we're going to get a lot of it. So as a practical matter for me is, how do I staff up to evaluate all of that? And
Well, I mean,
so we have a plan and a
but
team.
this might be an opportunity for maybe, and I don't know, man, we'd be speaking out of line. I mean, we obviously have a citizens advisory board. You have us trustees. But maybe get a little bit more creative about who's at the table to participate in this process, because it is a community commitment, and maybe we can be a little bit more creative about who's part of that process.
Yeah, thank you. So, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so I guess back to that previous slide, why would we not just do an RFP for the whole thing? All the components?
Let's talk a little bit about the gas part.
I think
Let me make sure, you mean for the whole power
The whole
bundle,
thing.
or?
Because, if the gas contract is gonna be 10 years, and when
it doesn't have to be 10.
well, okay, yeah, so we
I
don't
want
know.
to make sure,
So
because
how do we determine?
Usually the source providers for the gas deal on existing,
Yeah.
they're not necessarily the same player. So we're just
Right.
gonna blitz the market all around. If they wanna combine and give us a combination bid on the whole thing, that'll be fine too. So,
Okay, but on our specific request for a mix, generation mix.
yeah, but typically most people are looking at solar and energy storage more so than,
Because that's new.
because we don't wanna build a plant. If we were building, we're not building, we're just trying to get enough capacity to leverage our exposure and transition out of older units. So you're not gonna find a ton of people
Sure.
in a whole space, but we might, and so that's all open. They can bid on all of it.
And I think maybe where we're getting a little confused, or at least I'll say I'm getting confused, is that last I think board meeting, right? It was about potentially investing in one of our existing plants, correct? A significant amount of money. And I guess, is there a direct correlation to this ask?
That was
Two
we
separate-
took that as a thing to look at about whether or not any of the existing plants could be repowered for another, we're gonna do that, we're gonna look at that too.
Okay, so it's two.
We ultimately, if you look
Right.
at all of the capacity, everything gets old over time, and so 1,700 megawatts will grow to 2,500, so we'll have to be looking at a lot of different solutions, but we'll bring those back as well.
Yeah, but my point being is that this is sort of a plan to replace, for reliability purposes, roughly 1,500 to 1,700 megawatts.
Yes, sir.
Why are we not just saying, bring us that plan? Bring us a proposal for that, as opposed to bring us a proposal for 60% of that?
I know that the buzzword is all requirements, everything, but again, if we could go to a Botsilla plant that is very different, and we could go to biodiesel or some other activity. All we're really trying to do now,
Let's find out
again,
what's out
is create more capacity, just like the STEP program, and
Sure.
we will continue to look at those additional opportunities. But we're not trying to do an all resource, because we're not trying to build any more gas right now. Our packaging is intentional to create capacity, but we ultimately will open it up as we have more megawatts to do, and we're thinking about new capacity.
Dr. Easter.
Yeah, I think, look, ultimately the solar and the storage component is kind of, where we ultimately want to be, and how fast that storage comes down the price curve is how much we add on the storage side. We know the next 3 to 5 years, a gas toll to firm up that solar plus storage is going to be important, and so we're very open to what that time frame is. But if we're looking at a gas toll with a physical plant in ERCOT, there's just a handful of companies out there. It's not the same group of players that are going to bid on an RFP for solar and storage. So that's why we've been treating them somewhat separately with the gas toll. But we're very open to a shorter toll or a longer term to transition us to that storage space that we're talking about that can really carry the load at some
It
point.
is, the gas is a specific play for an ERCOT plant
Right.
that exists today, which we know who those are in the process. When we do an all resource requirements, because we're trying to put a lot more capacity and bundle and combine it, but we're just not there yet. We're gonna look at the repowering as well.
But if you go back to the usage curve, when we are using peak, with this,
Not that one, the
The
bar
other
one,
the straight line
the bar.
The bar
on
one.
the,
That one right here.
would this, obviously, we're not at the red line every day. We're there in the middle of the summer.
Right.
Everybody's using their ACs at the same time. Would we be using this supply, drawing off of that toll when we're not at peak?
Could be,
Or
because we
when
could
we're
be,
not
because
exceeding peak?
we could be, because other units have to go down and have maintenance, so you have it for the
Could be
whole
using, that
portfolio
would be a good
management.
test case.
Okay.
The gas toll is a combined cycle, so that's the latest, most efficient plant technology that's out there on the gas side. And so again, it will be in a very efficient part of that fleet, so it likely will get used, during more hours than just that peak hour. But it will put us in a very good position to shut down some of our older gas steam
It's
units,
less efficient.
Right.
which is less efficient. So you
You
will be.
start-
I would, so, again, my concerns and where I'm going. I would like, as we kind of move along in this discussion.
Yes, sir.
Is see, how we can couple those two things.
Right.
Yeah.
And one other thing, Mayor, the gas combined cycle is gonna have a lower carbon and water footprint than the gas steam. It still will have a carbon footprint relative to solar or storage, but since it is more efficient, it will have a lower carbon footprint than the gas steams that we would be looking to shut down.
We'll bring some more information forward on that.
That sounds good.
And again, the time frame is, I think we're very open to, is that 5 years, is it 7, is it?
We just put 10 because we're only in 2019 and 2030, and the market's really tight now, and there's not a lot of capacity. So really covering the next 3 to 5 years is really the good sweet spot. We're just wondering if you go any longer, do you get any other benefits, but we don't have to do all of that.
Right.
So we'll be exploring what the options look like.
And I mean, when we have to hedge a bit against an unknown, we have to hedge for our customers against an unknown environment as well in terms of, I mean, get a new administration, we might look at a carbon tax. How would that affect our decision on what generation we're going to purchase? That's why, you know, for me, just go out and see what the market will bear. We need 1,700 firm over the next 10 years. Let's give us the answers. If reliability is important, but also sustainability, security, and of course emissions, what's out there? We can go around that.
It's great feedback. I was talking about
The future is here.
sorry. I was talking about our request for proposals process, and then I was going to mention about the process for the gas firming, but I think we've just talked about all of this.
Yeah, we're good. We're good to
That did my
go.
slide. So anyway, that's kind of the detail right there. And so the timeline we're looking at right now is to continue this exploration of these firming capacity options, which does not exclude just purchasing straight power off the market. It could be just purchasing straight power off the market versus a toll from a specific plant. A disadvantage of straight power, of course, are that it's the ERCOT mix, which also includes coal, etc., and that it's a usually firm price, and so you get it even if you don't need it, and you pay the same price. So you don't have the flexibility of dispatching a unit up and down. We also are looking to turn around this RFP and get it out onto the street, receive the proposals, evaluate and recommend, and then hopefully toward the latter part of spring, execute perhaps the first solar and storage contract. So this sometime, we're looking at this playing out over the next 3 to 4 months as we have our conversations with you, the board, and our community along these two tracks. Any questions or feedback on this? Okay, and so it's our intention, just as we always say, that following the flexible path, that the implementation of this power bundle will help us in all 6 of our major lenses: the environmentally responsible, affordable, resilient, safety and security, as you mentioned, and increase the reliability of our plants for our native load. Any other questions?
John, I'm gonna make the same comment I made last month. If you don't have financial strength on there, all of that crap's useless. Without cash flow, without sustainability on the financial statement, you cannot do any of those, period.
You're correct.
So you better add that to it.
I wholeheartedly agree, and let me just restate: no one arguing for environmental sustainability is suggesting that we do it financially responsibly. The question is, how do we balance those two things? And I'm suggesting that we don't know where the future is going to go, but we do know it's going to be more reliable, it's going to be more sustainable, it's going to do all the things that our customers are asking for, because customers from here to Timbuktu are asking for the same things. And so I don't want us to get into a long-term play where we look back and say, well, you know what, if we waited for a year, perhaps we would have got storage more cheaply. Perhaps we would have been able to check more boxes than simply just the ROI in 2019. But I know these are visceral conversations for a lot of people, because it's not. I mean, the climate conversation is life or death in other places. Thank God it's not that way in San Antonio. But I will tell you that we have to continue to drive these conversations, but understanding that nobody arguing for responsibility to our environment is saying that we should be costing our customers out of their utilities. Quite contrary. The Climate Action Adaptation Plan for the City of San Antonio was built on a foundation of equity, ensuring that our most vulnerable customers, our most cost disadvantaged customers, were the ones that we were looking out for first. And I don't want anybody leaving with the misunderstanding that we're suggesting becoming environmentally sustainable on the backs of our customers. Quite the opposite.
I hope so, because those community fairs are very important to the feedback that we get, and I know that staying affordable is
Add
important.
financial strength to your deal, would you please?
Sure.
We're on the same page on that bit.
All right, I'll balance it off, and y'all too.
I'm telling you, without
No, I
financial
understand.
strength, you've got nothing, period. Take every one of them, they all go down the tube if you don't have cash flow.
We agree on that.
Period.
We agree.
We agree.
We'd all agree, Mr. Kelly.
It's kind of nice to end the meeting with all of us in agreement.
We all want to do the right thing, but it costs money.
Any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Thank you, that was excellent, appreciate it, yeah. So now we come to adjournment, do I have a motion to adjourn? So Dr. Mackey, a second?
Second, third, fourth,
I will
Mr.
second,
Kelly?
I will second.
All right, any discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
The meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.